So good morning. I will be speaking on the carcinoma breast. So this is a very important topic because you can have question in theory as well as you can have long case in your practical examination. Very important topic. So cancer breast is the most common cancer of females throughout the world, and in India also, cancer breast is the most common cancer of women. Earlier, it was the cervical cancer which was the most common in Indian women, but now the incidence of the breast cancer has surpassed cervical cancer. So, because the incidence of the cancer breast is most common in females, so breast cancer is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in women. So, broadly, breast cancers can be divided into two categories: epithelial cancers, and these are known as adenocarcinomas, and mesenchymal cancers, and that is malignant phylloides, liposarcoma, angiosarcoma. Now, commonest cancers of the breast, they are epithelial cancers or the adenocarcinoma. So, when we talk of breast cancer, literally we mean that we are talking of the adenocarcinoma of the breast because these are the commonest cancers of the breast. Now, there are various risk factors for cancer breast. These are the sex, age, personal history of the breast cancer, benign breast diseases, family history and genetic risk factors, endocrine factors, dietary factors, and other environmental factors. So, coming to one by one, sex is important risk factor for cancer breast. It has been seen that the breast cancer is 100 times more common in females as compared to men. So the incidence of the breast cancer is less in males. Now, age is probably the most important risk factor for cancer breast. And age-adjusted incidence of the breast cancer continues to increase with advancing age in the female populations. The breast cancer is rare in the women younger than 25 years of age, and thereafter the incidence of the breast cancer increases to 1 in 233 from ages 30 to 39, 1 in 69 from ages 40 to 49, 1 in 42 from ages 50 to 59. So that means with the increasing age of the females, the incidence of the cancer keeps on increasing. So age is a very important risk factor for the cancer breast. Now, next is the personal history of the breast cancer. So a history of the breast cancer in one breast increases the chances of the second primary cancer in the contralateral breast. And the magnitude of the risk of developing the breast cancer in the contralateral breast, it depends upon the diagnosis. At the age of the diagnosis means that the age of appearance of the first cancer. If the first cancer appears at the younger age, then chances of developing the cancer in the contralateral breast are more. Then similarly, it also depends upon whether the adjuvant chemotherapy was given, endocrine therapy was given, because the patients who have received endocrine therapy or adjuvant chemotherapy are the first primary cancer, then chances of developing the breast cancer in the contralateral breast are less because these drugs act as chemoprophylaxis for the contralateral breast. Now, in the last lecture, when we discussed the benign breast diseases, so at that time also, we have discussed that one group of the benign breast diseases that has risk of breast cancer. So, proliferative benign disorders without atypia has a relative risk of developing breast cancer to the tune of 1.5 to 2. And the conditions under this are giant fibroadenoma, complex fibroadenoma, duct papilloma, sclerosing agnosis, moderate to severe ductal hyperplasia. Another group of the benign breast diseases responsible for developing the breast cancer is the proliferative lesions with atypia, where the risk of developing breast cancer is much higher. Now, another risk factor for developing breast cancer is the family history and genetic risk factors. So here the first degree relatives of the patients of breast cancer, that is mother, sister, daughter, they have twofold to threefold increased risk of developing breast cancer. And the risk of this breast cancer is much higher if the affected first degree relative develops this cancer at early age group, that is premenopausal period, and risk is again higher if that first primary cancer, that this cancer in the first degree relative is bilateral disease. So about 10% of the breast cancers, they are genetic in origins. They occur because of the inheritance of the germline mutations of the various genes. And these various genes are BRCA1, BRCA2, P53, PTEN, and all these genes are tumor suppressor genes. So BRCA1 gene is located on the long arm of chromosome 17, BRCA2 is located on the long arm of chromosome 13. So the women with the germline mutations of this BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, they have a risk of developing breast cancer to the tune of 65% and 45% respectively. So women with this mutations of this BRCA1, BRCA2, they also have chances of developing ovarian cancer. Now another gene is the P53 gene mutations. This is also tumor suppressor gene. This is also located on the long arm of the chromosome 17, and germline mutation of the gene. This gene, it causes multiple cancers, that is known as De-Fromenich syndrome. So female with this mutation can have cancer breast, can have sarcomas, can have brain tumors. Then another is the germline mutation of the PTEN gene, and this germline mutation of the gene will cause Codden syndrome, where again multiple cancers and common cancers are cancer breast and thyroid cancer. Another risk factor for cancer breast is endocrine factors. So here the increased exposure to estrogen, that may be endogenous or exogenous, is associated with increased risk of developing breast cancer, whereas reduced exposure of this estrogen has a protective role. Early menarche before age of 12 years and late menopause, they have increased risk of developing breast cancer. Studies have shown that there is 10% reduction of the breast cancer for each 2 years delay in menarche. And if the age of menopause is after the age of 55 years, then there is double risk of developing breast cancer. Then another condition associated with breast cancer is nulliparity, and if there is late pregnancy. Now, full-term pregnancy at the early age, below around 20 years of age, and breastfeeding have a protective role. Now, here breastfeeding, it causes lactation amenorrhea, so it is the number of the menstrual cycles which are decreased, so resulting into less risk of developing breast cancer. So this estrogen hormones is used for various conditions, contraceptions, menstrual irregularities, fertility treatment. So studies have shown, previous studies have shown that the contraceptive pills taken for a long period, then they can have little risk of breast cancer. But recent studies, they have shown that the contraceptive pills, they have no risk of breast cancer, but definitely hormone replacement therapy in the postmenopausal period that have a definite role in developing breast cancer. And so women receiving combination hormone replacement therapy with estrogen and progesterone for a period of 5 years have approximately a 20% increased risk for development of breast cancer. Another risk factor is diet. So dietary fats, especially obese women in the postmenopausal period, they are at a risk of developing breast cancer, because in the postmenopausal women, the source of the estrogen is androgens aromatization in the fat cells. So if more fat cells in obese patients, in ladies, then more risk of developing breast cancer. Then alcohol is also blamed for developing breast cancer, because alcohol also increases the level of the estrogen by promoting the aromatizations and impairing the metabolism of the estrogen in the liver. And then, of course, high fiber diet, antioxidants, vitamins, fruits, vegetables, these all have a protective role. Now, another is the radiation in the childhood has this risk of developing breast cancer. So radiation in the childhood, in the chest wall, in the neck, mental region for Hodgkin lymphoma can expose the patient for increased risk of the breast cancer. So now coming to the breast cancer classification. So broadly, breast cancer, so two types, epithelial cancer, mesenchymal cancers. Now epithelial cancers, adenocarcinoma. Now this adenocarcinoma, non-invasive cancers and invasive cancers. Now non-invasive cancers are lobular carcinoma in situ and ductal carcinoma in situ. So non-invasive cancer means when the cancer cells keep on growing in the lumen of the ducts or the acini of the lobules, and they do not penetrate or invade the basal membrane. However, invasive epithelial cancers are those cancers when the cancers they invade the basal membrane. Now, FNAC, because commonest test we perform is FNAC for cancer breast. So FNAC cannot differentiate whether that cancer is invasive cancer or it is the in situ cancer, because FNAC will tell just about the cells which appear malignant. But FNAC cannot tell whether that cancer cells they have invaded the basal membrane. So for that we need biopsy. So once FNAC is showing malignant cells, then we go for the needle biopsy to differentiate whether that cancer is invasive cancer or in situ cancer. So lobular carcinoma in situ, it is the non-invasive cancer, and hardly there is no physical finding, and it is also not detected on screening mammography because there are no finding on mammography. But this lobular carcinoma in situ is detected incidentally on biopsy, which has been taken for some other reason. But this lobular carcinoma in situ, this is considered as a precursor of invasive cancer. So if the report is lobular carcinoma in situ, then we have two options. One is that we should observe the patient regularly, or other is chemoprevention with this hormone drugs, anti-estrogens. Then another non-invasive cancer is ductal carcinoma in situ. Again, this ductal carcinoma in situ, clinically there are no findings when there is no lump, but it is detected on mammography where there are clusters of microcalcifications on mammography. Here also the cancer cells, they keep on growing inside the lumen of the duct. So there is central necrosis of this growing cancer cells, and after necrosis there is calcifications. So that calcification is picked up by mammography. Now there are four types of this ductal carcinoma in situ. Now 30 to 45%, 40% of the cases of the ductal carcinoma in situ, they change into invasive cancer. So this definitely requires treatment, that is lumpectomy plus radiotherapy or mastectomy. Now this in situ cancers, it does not spread through lymphatics or hematogens. So here there is no role of axillary lymph node dissection. Now coming to the invasive epithelial cancers. So invasive epithelial cancers, again two types. One is invasive lobular carcinoma, that is to the tune of 10%, invasive ductal carcinoma 80%. Now this invasive ductal carcinoma, further they have different types, and the commonest type is invasive ductal carcinoma, no special type. And then there are special types, that is tubular carcinoma, mucinous carcinoma, medullary carcinoma, ribriform carcinoma, papillary carcinoma, medullary carcinoma, breast, metaplastic carcinoma. So these special types means there are specific morphological features seen under microscope. Otherwise, these are all invasive ductal carcinoma. So coming to the invasive lobular carcinoma, which accounts for 10% of all the breast cancers. And here there is no distinct mass, but basically the patient presents with the architectural distortion, area of thickening in the breast. and on cut surface, their areas of rubbery consistency are seen. And now another feature of this lobular carcinoma is that most of the time it is multifocal, or sometimes it can be bilateral. And microscopically, it has this characteristic feature that cells are not attached to each other. They are non-cohesive tumor cells infiltrate in a single Indian file pattern. So you can see this the picture that the cells are arranged in linear strands which are not attached to each other. So this is a feature of lobular invasive carcinoma. Now another is the invasive rectal carcinoma, not otherwise specified or no special type. So we can call it no special type or not otherwise specified. So this is the most common type of invasive breast cancer, which accounts for 70 to 75% of the patients of the breast cancer, and it has a intermediate prognosis. Grossly, this tumor has a well-defined lump, so hard spiculated lump. On cutting, this lump has a gritty sensation because of the dense stromal desmoplasia, and the cut surface looks grayish white in color, which can be clearly differentiated from the adjoining yellowish breast tissue. So in this practical examination, you are shown a sample of that, given a specimen of pathology specimen to identify where the lesion. So you have to identify that lesion, that it looks grayish white, a spiculated lesion with the surrounding normal yellowish fatty tissue of the breast. Microscopically, there is no specific pattern. That is why this is known as no special type. So malignant cells are arranged haphazardly into the stroma. Another is the invasive tubular carcinoma. This accounts for only 2 to 3% of the invasive cancers. It is a low-grade cancer. It is a there is hardly any metastasis, so prognosis is excellent. And this cancer is usually small in size, up to 2 centimeter, grayish white on this cut surface. And the typical feature is that this microscopically, these cancer cells are arranged in tubule formation. So this tubule formation is also taken in consideration for histological grading. So then we will discuss later on that the grading. So another is the mucinous invasive carcinoma. This carcinoma also have favorable outcome. This here the mucin is produced by the cancer cells. So on cut surface, that mass is soft, gelatinous in consistency, and the tumor cells they float in that mucin produced by these cells. Medullary carcinoma of the breast also this accounts to the tune of 2 to 5% of the cases. This cancer is triple negative. Triple negative means we will discuss later on that estrogen receptor negative, progesterone receptor negative, and HER2 new receptors negative. This fairly this tumor is high grade, and on cut surface it looks like a pearly white, and the tumor cells microscopically, typical feature is that the lymphocytes infiltration in the this tumor cell, this tumor. Now another this histological subtype is medullary carcinoma of the breast. So this is highly virulent cancer, and clinically it looks like a diffuse erythema of the breast. There is induration, there can be tenderness, and pudora appearance is there, and there is no clear-cut mass. And histologically, there is extensive dermal lymphatic invasion by the tumor cells, tumor emboli. So this is the reason that the dermal lymphatics, they are infiltrated by the this tumor cell, so they block the lymphatics, resulting into the edema of the skin, so giving typical features of that pudora, that is orange peel. Another this variant of the carcinoma breast, cribriform carcinoma, this microscopic appearance is just like looks like cribriform, and it has better prognosis. Now, histological grading is done for all cancers because it tells about the biological behavior of the cancer. It tells about the degree of differentiation of the cancer cells. It is helpful. It tells about this prognosis of that cancer, and sometimes it may help us in planning the treatment also. So the histological grading of the breast cancer is done according to the Elston-Ellis modification of Stark-Bloom-Richardson grading system, which is based upon three parameters of the tumor, and these three parameters are degree of tubule formation. So tubule formation, we have seen in that previous slide that tubular invasive carcinoma where tubules were there. So when there are tubules, that has a better prognosis. So degree of tubule formation. Second factor is the nuclear pleomorphism. Third is mitotic activity. So each of these features is scored from 1 to 3, and then score is added to give final score 3 to 9. And if the score is 3 to 5, that is labeled as grade 1. And if the score is 6 to 7, that is graded as grade 2. And if the score is 8 to 9, that is graded as grade 3. Now, coming to the metastasis of the breast cancer. So, cancers have a tendency to spread. So, here breast cancer also spreads. There is local spread, there is lymphatic spread, and spread through this bloodstream. So, local spread. Now, as the tumor grows in the breast parenchyma, so it invades the adjoining breast parenchyma, and superficially it will involve the skin, causing ulceration of the skin and fungating of that tumor outside the skin. And when the tumor grows deep, it will involve the pectoralis muscle and chest wall. Lymphatic spread is to the axillary lymph nodes, mainly to the axillary lymph nodes, but it can also spread to internal mammary lymph nodes. So metastasis in the lymph nodes is an important prognostic factor, because once the cancer breast has metastasized to the axillary lymph nodes, then prognosis is not good. Then another spread is by the bloodstream. So breast cancer through hematogenous spread goes to the right side of the heart, then to the lungs. So secondaries are seen in the lungs, and then from the lungs it can go anywhere in any organ, so to the liver, to the brain. But other mode of this spread of breast cancer is to the vertebrae without going to the lungs. So it is through the posterior intercostal veins of the chest wall, which communicates with the vertebral plexus of the vertebrae. So the cancer breast can go to the vertebrae directly through these veins without going into the lungs. So coming to the clinical presentation, so cancer breast can occur in any part of the breast, including the axillary tail of spines, but majority of the cancers, they are seen in the upper outer quadrant of the breast. The reason is that this upper outer quadrant of the breast has maximum glandular tissue. And coming to the clinical features, early cancer is usually asymptomatic, no symptoms are there. Patient usually present with a hard lump, which depending upon the duration or virulence of the cancer can involve the skin or chest wall. And pain is not a feature of cancer breast. Rarely there can be discomfort in that lump. So another clinically you can elicit dimpling, and dimpling is because of the involvement of Cooper's ligament. So these Cooper's ligament, when they are involved, so they pull the skin inward, so we can see the dimpling. But this dimpling will not change the stage. Another is the pudioura, where the skin looks like orange peel, and this is due to the dermal lymphatic infiltration. So typical appearance of pudioura, and once there is pudioura, so the tumor becomes T4. So pudioura will change the stage, but dimpling will not change the stage. Then there can be skin ulceration. Then there can be retraction of the nipple, recent retraction of the nipple, because retraction of the nipple can be congenital, it can be due to benign condition, for example, ductal or chronic recurrent abscess. So here, recent retraction of the nipple, and this retraction of the nipple occurs because of the fibrosis, because whenever there is cancer is growing, so there is stromal desmoplasia, so dense fibrous reaction is there, and then this lactiferous ducts are pulled inside, so there is retraction of the nipple. Then there can be discharge from the nipple, and this discharge is usually bloody discharge, and this discharge is from usually single one or two ducts. Now, sometimes this breast cancer can present as axillary mass, means primary may be occult or small, and patients comes with a big mass in the axilla, that is the metastatic lymph node. And then clinically, you may have features of distant metastasis. For example, metastasis in the lungs, hemoptysis, and then bony pains because of scandaries in the bones. Then if the brain, secondary seizures, abdominal secondary ascites, or hepatomegaly, or the Purkinje tumor, that is when cells are deposited on the ovary. So this picture shows dimpling on the left side, lower quadrant. You can see the dimpling. So dimpling is because of the infiltration or involvement of the Cooper's ligament, and dimpling will not change the stage. This is just a clinical finding. Here in both the pictures, you can see the pudioura, and this is because of the dermal lymphatic infiltration by the tumor emboli. So they block the dermal lymphatics, so there is edema, but the areas where there are Bailey follicles, they cannot swell. So typical appearance of this orange peel. This slide shows retraction of the nipple. So this is because of the this fibrosis, retraction of the lactiferous ducts, so nipple is inverted inside. This shows the skin involvement. So involvement of the skin in the form of ulcerations or fungation, that is T4. Then pudioura is T4. Dimpling will not change this state. So this is the picture of that inflammatory carcinoma of the breast. So typical this erythema is there, confused with mastitis. So how we diagnose breast cancer? So first is triple assessment, very important this part of this diagnosis. Triple assessment consists of proper clinical examination, that is good history and proper complete breast examination, and then imagings, mammography, ultrasonography, rarely MRI may be required, then tissue diagnosis, FNAC, bone needle biopsy, sometimes even lumpectomy. Now, lab tests, tumor markers, they are elevated in cancer breast, but they are not much help. Then liver enzymes, SGOT, SGPT, they are elevated when there is liver metastasis. Then serum calciums and tertiary phosphatase, they are also elevated when there is bone metastasis. So in breast cancer, once we have diagnosed that patient is having breast cancer, the diagnosis has been done by triple assessment, then we see the extent of the disease, that whether that cancer is localized to the breast or it has spread to different organs. So this is done by various investigations. So X-ray chest, ultrasound of the abdomen, then contrast enhanced CT of the abdomen, thorax or the head, And this is not done in all cases. For stage 1, 2 is not done, but in stage 3, when there is locally advanced cancer, or when the liver enzymes are elevated, or if there are localizing signs in the form of cough or seizures, then we go for the CT scan of the thorax, CT scan of the head and abdomen. Bone scan, again to see the bone scanneries, and this bone scan is also done in stage 3 or in stage 2 when there are localizing symptoms in the form of bony pain, or when there is this alkaline phosphatase is elevated or serum calcium is also elevated. If we are not having the facility of bone scan, we can go for the skeletal survey. That means X-ray of the spine, long bones, pelvis. And then PET scan has also a role to detect the occult systemic metastasis. So you can see this X-ray of the chest, which is showing multiple rounded scanneries in both the lung fields. So typical in cancer breast. This is the CT scan of the thorax showing multiple scanneries in both the lungs. Now here liver is studded with scanneries, multiple scanneries in the liver. And this is also again a case of cancer breast with multiple scanneries in the liver. Now here patient with history of seizures, patient of cancer breast, and CT scan of the head is showing multiple scanneries in the brain. Now here bone scanneries, bone in this left side on this first film of the pelvis, there is loss of density of the bones in this ileum. So these scanneries in the bones, they are osteolytic lesions, means more osteoclastic this reaction in the bones, osteolytic. Central film is showing that pathological fracture, intertrochanteric fracture of the femur, and the loss of density of the bone. And this last, spine X-ray showing lytic lesions in the thoracic spines. So the scanneries in the bones, they are mainly osteolytic. Now molecular markers such as estrogen receptors, progesterone receptors, and human epidermal growth factor receptors, that is HER2/neu, are usually done in all the cases of breast cancer, because they not only tell about the prognosis of the cancer, but they also help us in deciding the treatment of the breast cancer. And 80% of the this breast cancer patients, they are estrogen receptor positive. That means cancer cells, they grow in response to the estrogen hormone. Similarly, 65% of the patients of the cancer breast, they are progesterone receptor positive. That means the cancer cells, they grow in response to the progesterone hormone. So when the patients are ERPR receptor positive, they respond to the hormone therapy. And ERPR receptor positive patients, they have better prognosis as compared to the patients which are ERPR receptor negative. Now another is the human epidermal growth factor receptor HER2/neu, which is not this is a receptor protein. Normally this controls the cell growth, division and repair of the breast cells, and in about 30% of the cases of breast cancer, this HER2 receptor protein, they do not work correctly and make too many copies of this HER2. This is known as HER2 positive or HER2 amplifications or overexpression. So when there are too many copies, too many proteins, HER2 proteins are there, so they the breast cancer cells, they grow fast and divide in an uncontrolled way. So in 30% of the cases of breast cancer, this HER2 is positive. So once it is positive, then the prognosis is not good. But this possibility of the HER2, this receptor, it can predict, it can tell us that which chemotherapy is to be used. So they respond to the anthracycline and taxane-based chemotherapy and targeted therapy, that is trastuzumab. So how do we test these receptors? So estrogen receptors and progesterone receptors, both they are assessed by immunohistochemistry, and this HER2 new this receptors, they are assessed by immunohistochemistry or fluorescence in situ hybridization. Now, staging of the tumor. So we always do the staging of the cancer because staging tells the anatomical spread of the cancer, and this is based upon three factors. That is tumor, N is the tumor, N is the node, M is the metastasis, and so the T means tumor size or extent of primary tumor. N is whether there is presence or absence of the metastasis in the regional lymph nodes. M means presence or absence of the distant metastasis. So this staging, it tells us, it helps us in planning the treatment. It tells us about the prognosis of that cancers, and this staging also helps us for exchanging the information of the such patients in different centers. And the staging is done according to the American Joint Committee on Cancer. And we have clinical staging, clinical TNM, which is based upon clinical and radiological examination. And then staging is done after this surgery from that pathology examination. So this is the staging of primary tumor, that is T1 to T4. Then regional lymph nodes, and then whether there is M0 or M1, and then staging. After doing this TNM staging, stage grouping is done, because if we write or note on individually T1, individually N1, so there will be roughly 24 variants. So these 24 variants are grouped into 4 stages according to their behavior and prognosis. So 4 stagings, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. And this slide is showing the prognosis of the breast cancer in different stages. For example, in stage 1, the 5-year overall survival is 95%. In stage 2, the 5-year overall survival is 70 to 85%. In stage 3, survival is 48 to 52%. And in stage 4, survival is 18%. So this is the last slide. Now we will continue next time the remaining part of the breast cancer, that is the management part. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you.